I'm just going to double check, but I do believe that we are now live. I'm just going to check the link.
It does say live in the corner on my screen, I think.
Yeah. Just want to check. Let's go to Twitter. Boop. There we are. If we're live, can you just put in the chat to say something like hello, just so that we know we're working, because my brain is working quite slowly at the minute to find the link. Where is it? There it is. Ta-da! My brain is working. Lovely, it is working. So there are things taking place. There we are. The comments have just picked up. Can everyone see the comments now?
Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. So we are going to introduce ourselves. So we are the Dyspraxic in Women live stream. That is who we are now. So I'm going to allow everyone to introduce themselves. If we start with Kayleigh.
Hi, I'm Kayleigh. I'm a student in Leeds. And apologies in advance, because if you hear someone randomly singing songs, in my next door neighbours are students and they've all moved in and they're really irritating and they can't leave the house because of lockdown. So they're just randomly shouting lyrics to who's that, what's that to each other. So if you randomly hear each other be like, what's that? Text her, WhatsApp. It's my neighbours, sorry.
Should I go?
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, my name is Sade. I am from Leicester. I'm 28. Yeah, that's about it.
And then Siobhan.
Yeah, so my name's Siobhan. I'm originally from Leicester, but I now live in the northwest of England. And I'm 58, very, very nearly 59, but I'm still 58. And I'm a parent. I used to work in the civil service, but I'm not working at the moment. And I have one daughter.
Chloe?
I'm Chloe. I am 24 years old. I am a dyspraxic blogger from Plymouth. Some of you watching might know me better by the name Deviant Dyspraxic, but yeah, I'm Chloe.
Wonderful. And we're going to try Sarah now. We had a few issues with Sarah with her microphone working, so I'm going to unmute her and hopefully it will work. Sarah? Sarah? Okay, well, this is Sarah. Her microphone isn't working at the minute, and I'm hoping that will fix. But Sarah is a dyspraxic mum with 2 dyspraxic children. She has a son and daughter who both have dyspraxia as well. So hopefully, if we can get her microphone working, then she can chat about that with us. Okay, right. So we are all new to this. So we are first going to talk about the diagnosis process. I just want to check that is right. Yes. So for each of us, the diagnosis process has been different. For some of us, we haven't been diagnosed at all, and that's for different reasons. So if we start with Kayleigh.
Hi. I wasn't diagnosed as a child, which is absolute rubbish. It turns out there's a reason why I can't tie shoelaces. So I wasn't diagnosed as a child. I wasn't diagnosed until I was a lot older, so I was about 16-ish, which has a lot of effects as well, I think. But yeah.
Would anyone else like to talk about
diagnosis?
Well, my diagnosis happened, I think it was the second year of university. It was just in a conversation in passing to one of the technicians on my course, and I was saying like how I never really got the whole maths thing, and there were some other things as well that I've learned later as well that might have indicated there was an issue. In my early childhood, they had some concerns with my speech as well. But yeah, like the official diagnosis didn't happen until my second year of university. I think I was like 21, 22 at the time. And yeah, I did get like assistance and stuff, like, you know, programs to help me with like my essay writing and stuff. But by then I'd had like a bunch of coping mechanisms that I'd formulating, and the help seemed rather bothersome and interruptive of like my process in general. So I'm not sure if anything helped at that time, but since then I'm not sure if it has made that much like a difference. It's just an explanation as to, an explanation to why I've had the problems that I've had in my kind of educational
Is there
career.
a particular team that you spoke to help get your diagnosis? Is there?
I don't recall. It was just like I don't remember fully. Like, it was just like the technician told me, "Oh, maybe you should just go and get tested," and I think I just went to like their kind of support department, and they booked me in and they did some tests and they were like, "Yeah, this is the issue," kind of thing, and that was really about it.
Lovely. Siobhan, would you like to talk about yours, or do you want to skip this one?
Yeah.
Happy
So basically, I mean, I'm 58 now. I didn't get diagnosed with dyspraxia and dyslexia till I was 53. So basically, I went through my whole life very, very frustrated, basically. And it was such a relief when I did get a diagnosis. It was like a light bulb moment. It was like, wow, that's why I couldn't do that. That's why I couldn't do that. And it was a relief, really. I actually was going for a dyslexia diagnosis. I didn't ask for a dyspraxia because I didn't know what dyspraxia was. And so I asked for a dyslexia diagnosis, and when it came back, yeah, you're mildly dyslexic, but mild to moderate to severe dyspraxia. I was like, what the hell's dyspraxia? So it was a whole new learning curve, and the more I learned about it, the more I completely understood myself.
Who did you speak to about getting your diagnosis? Is that something you did through your GP or someone else?
So I was actually working at the time in the civil service, and I was going through occupational health for other reasons. And I asked them if they would give me a diagnosis for dyslexia. And to my surprise, they agreed.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Chloe, do you want to discuss this, or do you want to skip to the next one?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. So basically, similar to Siobhan, I hadn't heard of dyspraxia, and I thought I might possibly be dyslexic. So I was actually at uni and I'd never heard the word dyspraxia, and I went to the learning support department and I mentioned basically the things I was struggling with, because I started uni late anyway because I was always quite slow. I thought I basically wasn't very clever, so I basically held it off. And at the end of first year, I went to the learning support department and I spoke to them about all the things I was struggling with. And the lady talking to me, she said, "I don't think you're dyslexic, I think you're dyspraxic." And I was like, what's dyspraxia? I've never heard this word before. But I ended up getting like a test for it. And I ended up being diagnosed with, it was dyspraxia with dyslexic traits. So I'm kind of a little bit of both, but really dyspraxia is the main thing. And I ended up taking an intermission year after that to kind of process and like learn more about what dyspraxia is, which is how I found out about the lack of diagnosis in women and stuff. And that's kind of what's pushed me with all this kind of woman stuff now. So yeah.
Wonderful. So I was also diagnosed at university. I had a similar issue to you ladies where I kind of spoke to someone and said, I think that there's like some kind of dyslexia thing going on here because I'm not processing a lot of what's being said. So I went to the disability support team. I can't remember what they were called. And they booked me in for a dyslexia test. And they normally do like a pre-test before the main one because unfortunately you do have to pay for them. So I had the little pre-test and the guy said to me, "You are definitely dyspraxic," assuming that I already knew that. I was the same as Chloe. I'd never heard of it before. It was not something I'd ever come across. So that's when I then went ahead. I was able to get a slight discount on my diagnosis test just because of I was within that threshold of like household income. Depending on where you go massively depends on the price. Unfortunately for adults, there is a price for that unless it's paid for by your company. At the time, and I'm 20, I'm either 27 or 28 years old, I cannot remember. But I was 18 at the time, and at the time I only had to pay, I think, was £150. It was originally 300, but now the price can be anywhere from 600 plus. So unfortunately, as adults, there often always is a price there, but not always. It depends on the circumstances, the location, where it is, who you see, and things like that. So I think some of you in the comments, so let's just say hello to who we've got watching. We've got quite a few people here. So who do we have? We've got Rose, who runs the Dyspraxia Canada Twitter account. We've got Maskin. We've got Yan He, Edward. Hello. Everybody say hello. We've got Sally, Lauren. Unfortunately, Sarah has dropped out of the stream, as you've noticed. Unfortunately, she was having technical issues, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to resolve that in the meantime. But hopefully we will have Sarah the next time. I'm holding hope that Sarah will eventually join us, because there are some wonderful things that she wanted to share, which hopefully we'll be able to share with you in a separate video. So let's go to the next question that we have, which Siobhan has highlighted a little bit, which is the emotional impact. And I've put a little typo there. I've put ID diagnosis instead of diagnosis. So the emotional impact of being diagnosed is different in everyone. For some people, it's a relief. For some, it's more of an emotional journey. So who would like to start with that one? Or should we start with Kayleigh and go round again? Yeah,
That's all right.
Yeah. When I realised I was dyspraxic, it was quite like a relief, really, for things like not being able to tie shoelaces, not being able to like make beds very well, that sort of like normal things, dance routines when you're a child, that sort of thing. So it was kind of like useful to have something. But then the more I found out about dyspraxia, the more I started to think, I don't actually have a personality. Every quirk I have is just dyspraxia in like a thing. But no, I'm getting over it. It's definitely worth having, I think.
For me, I don't think at the time I really had much of a luxury of processing it, and I definitely noticed the lack of information that was there pertaining to adults. And then there is the factor of like, being a woman and a woman of color as well. Like, I think it's it's just so lacking in so many ways. There's no kind of real context in terms of those kind of factors for me. I mean, like now seeing that there is more women who are similarly affected to whatever degree is like a really good thing. But yeah, like I do find it frustrating. It definitely did provide some kind of relief, actually, in terms of, like I said, the explanation part. But at the same time, it's really frustrating because no matter how much you explain it, people don't really understand, because it's still kind of relatively unknown in comparison to dyslexia and even dyscalculia and that kind of thing. So explaining it to employers, they don't get it. They just think that you can't keep up if it's kind of manual tasks that I've been doing in a previous job, or if it's maybe some kind of written form of thing. They might not understand why you're making, say, spelling errors, if that's or grammatical errors, if that's something that that's one of the traits that that you have. So I'd say it's quite mixed, to be honest, dependent on the situation.
I mean, as I alluded in the last question, it was a real light bulb moment for me, and I understood completely why I couldn't do the things and all the stress it had given me. And I look back on my life and I just realised, like, particularly as a child, I was so shy, and I came from a big family, so I always thought I was shy because I was one of the little ones in the family. And it was interesting telling my mother at the time she was alive that I'd been diagnosed with dyspraxia, and she kind of went, "Oh, I don't know about that, you're just you." So she wasn't dismissive, but she wasn't encouraging. But the actual first person I told rang about my diagnosis was my GP that I had when I was born. And he actually said that obviously they knew I had some kind of disability, but they just never knew what. And so I knew I was always kind of treated differently in the family. But it was just really good to be able to go to people after all this time and say, look, this is what I am. And I've had negative reactions to it and I've had positive reactions. But the biggest thing was learning what it was. I'm still learning what it is. But I was very fortunate in through the union where I was working in civil service. They were the ones that put me in touch with the Dyspraxia Foundation and found out about that. And from that, I found a group where I was living. And it was so brilliant meeting up with a group of dyspraxic people. That's what really helped me. And from there, I've always wanted to be an advocate for, I just don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through. And so I find it very interesting now talking to people that have been diagnosed as children. Because I always think, if I was diagnosed as a child, I wouldn't have had the struggles I had. But I realise that lots of people I've spoken to have different aspects of childhood diagnoses to when they go into adulthood. I think that's a whole different topic.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I should start talking or not.
yeah, I'm finished.
But yeah, similar to Siobhan, it was a light bulb moment in a way, but it was also very emotional for me because I went through a lot of my childhood getting bullied for things which actually you could relate to dyspraxia. So my handwriting was a really big one. I got bullied by students and teachers for my handwriting, and I also was always slower than my brothers at classwork and stuff like that, so they would often get A's whilst I was putting in the same effort and getting B's and C's, and I could never understand why I was doing so much work and not seeing the results. And ended up also getting bullied by a group of lads who would call me stupid. And before GCSE going into the exam hall, you have to be silent once you're in the hall, but when you're outside, they would chant, "You're going to fail, you're stupid," stuff like that. So that really sank in, and I thought I was stupid. So I ended up not going to uni 2 years. And when I found out an explanation of all these things that happened when I was younger, at first it was kind of a sigh of relief because I realised, no, I'm not stupid, and there is a reason why I struggle. But then I also had this kind of almost resentment, because I'm a lot of these things to do with dyspraxia should have been really obvious to teachers and things like that. And I found out that my mum had actually tried talking to the school and they'd kind of brushed it off, while my brothers both ended up getting help. So I found out about that. And I found out about, the lack of recognition of women, and relieved and had an explanation of why I struggled. I kind of started to feel kind of resentment and anger within myself. And there were moments where I would literally burst into tears because I would have, all these emotions, mixed emotions of relief and anger building up within me. And it was so hard to process, and I would just cry. And then I ended up eventually kind of thinking, well, sitting here with these emotions is not good. What I should be doing, making sure that other women in future don't end up in the same position that I did. And that's when I decided to start doing all the stuff I do with the Dyspraxic Women's Facebook and platform, because I thought I need to do something to make sure other women get recognised and have a voice in a way that I didn't when I was younger. So that's where the emotion me after my diagnosis.
It sounds to me like we've all had quite similar kind of reactions to our diagnoses. I mean, mine's been quite similar to Chloe, where I was diagnosed and suddenly I've been told that the reason you've struggled so much as a child is because of something you have no control over. Obviously, at the time, that's how I felt. That's what I was thinking. Those are the thoughts that were going through my head. You know, at the time, it's, you know, you were bullied because of this. You know, the way that people have treated you is because of something you can't control. I've been bullied by teachers, you know, sometimes by family members as well, because they don't know, you know, why things are happening. And to them, it's like, well, you're being slow, you're holding us back. And I'm not saying that they think that, but, you know, sometimes when you're in those situations, those things get said. And whilst I know now that those things that were said weren't meant in a malicious way, because I know that I struggle with these things, and I know that people are having to slow down what they're doing so that I keep up, I feel guilty about that, and I carry it with me. And so when I was diagnosed, I went through all the emotions. I went through the relief of kind of, oh my God, there's a name for it. Then it was anger. There was a lot of anger. And then there was kind of, you know, not wanting to believe it. And if anyone's been following me for a while on my channel, I went through a stage of drinking every other night, partying every other night, because I wanted to prove to myself that I was no different from anyone else, and I burnt myself out. Because at the end of the day, yes, we are different, and yes, we are the same, but we have to understand ourselves better. And I kind of went off the rails for a bit, and now I've kind of calmed down and gone, right, I have limits, these are my limits, everyone else has to accept my limits, and if they don't accept those limits, then are they really people I want in my life? So that was the emotion I went through. So we've got some people in the comments who are just talking about their experiences with diagnosis. And there was one that I noticed in here who mentioned about being diagnosed at a very young age, but then not finding out about it until they were 16, which was Yun Hee. I've lost your comment now, but it's in there somewhere. I've had a lot of people who've mentioned this, where they were diagnosed younger, and for whatever reason their parents haven't told them until later on in life. I'd be interested to know how you feel about that, and whether you feel that it, you know, was a negative effect or potentially actually a positive effect. So if you could put that in the comments, and then we'll read it out later.
Can I interject?
Yeah, sure.
So like I mentioned, like I there were signs of it. Obviously, because I'm originally from the Caribbean. At the time, I was in on a Caribbean island called Montserrat, and I just started school, and basically I moved to the UK because of a natural disaster, basically. But at the time when I got assessed for the speech issue that my teachers saw, my mum was very open about it. I don't think I've never not known about it. So it's very weird to me for people to hide that kind of thing from their children. I can understand, like, because you don't want them to feel deficient or different in any kind of way.
Yep.
However, like, if you know what's going on with you and the potential of why something might not work, then you can at least, you know, find a method of adjustment to deal with that thing. And if it's made known to your educators as well, then there might be a sort of dispensation that they could make in educating you. So yeah, I'd be really interested to see why their parents hid that from them until later.
Also, just jumping in, someone said something on there about men being more likely to have dyspraxia. And actually, it's not the case. Though men are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with dyspraxia than women, they think biologically it's the same. It's just a diagnosis process that sometimes...
Yes, correct. Yes, I've read 7 research papers in the last 3 days. They all contradict one another. So some of them will say men are 11 times more likely to have diagnosis, some are 4 times. It's just diagnosis. It's not actually having dyspraxia. There is 50-50. It's the same with things like autism, things like that. Again, literature that was written like 100 million years ago, only because of gender stereotypes where boys more likely to be diagnosed. Now that we're starting to slowly walk a little bit more into the 21st century, they're starting to be slightly more even. I say slightly more because it's not, as women are being diagnosed much later on in life. But just so you know, it is 50-50, but the diagnosis is more likely in guys.
just because of things like sport, really. Like, if a little boy struggles to kick a ball straight, people tend to notice it more than if a little girl struggles to kick a ball straight.
Yeah, we will come across that in a second, that we do have a section for that. So the next one on our list is support given at school, uni, work, or lack of. So if we start with Kayleigh again.
Okay, don't do what I did. It's the only advice I've got for you. I didn't officially tell my university I was dyspraxic. They still don't officially know. Like, my lecturers, individual lecturers know, but I didn't tell my university itself that I was dyspraxic, which is really stupid and just stubborn. But because of that, like, I have any sort of like additional help that I should have had, I haven't. So things like, I've just submitted a master's thesis and I know for sure that my referencing is terrible, and it's definitely going to cause problems. Oops. So don't. And then it got to a point where I didn't want to like tell my lecturers who knew I was dyspraxic that I was struggling, because really I should have told someone else within the uni and had support from them, and I didn't. So don't do that. Don't do me. Use your voices. Talk about dyspraxia and tell people. People are there to help. So use me as an example and do the opposite.
In my case, like I literally was just encouraged to go and get tested in passing. Earlier in my school career, no, there wasn't really anything, apart from there were comments on my writing. They used to call it windy writing because it used to look like cursive and rather big. And eventually I just switched to like writing in like uppercase letters to kind of remedy the legibility problem. So like I've kind of just been self-adapting all the way through. So for me, like, I'm not saying that I've never had problems. Like, obviously maths, I can't maths at all. Cannot do it. English was never a huge problem. I actually have quite a affinity for language in general. But spelling is a myth in any language that I know. I'm just like figuring it out as I go along. I would say that it feels like things have got better and worse in terms of my learning. Better in the sense that some mathematical concepts now I can kind of understand better, like it's slowly getting there. And I think that's just, you learn slower, and that's just how it is. And at one point the light bulb will kind of click. But worse as in like, like the way that certain things affect my memory and how I have to go about basically trying a bunch of methods in order to learn something, to find a way of learning something is rather exhausting. So I'd say that kind of summarizes the kind of education and support stuff.
Quick tip though, for anyone doing exams, what I found is if you speak like facts and things into something and listen to it back, that's a really easy way to learn things, and just have headphones in listening to it back. And once you get over the awkwardness of having to hear your own voice, like, it works. So give it a shot.
Siobhan?
Yeah, so I just really struggled at school, basically. Obviously, I didn't know I had any specific learning difficulty. Nothing was diagnosed, and I just really struggled. I couldn't do exams. I did get some exams because I worked really, really hard at the ones I liked. But I did apply to go to university when I was 18, but I failed my A-levels. So I didn't, because I just couldn't do exams. I wish, Kayleigh, I'd had your advice at that time, because even I did go back to adult college. I loved politics, and I went back to do A-level politics, and I absolutely loved the course, but I still couldn't do the exam. And then I went to college when I was in my 30s, and I particularly chose a course I didn't have to do exams. So I did manage to get a diploma in youth and community work. But I think back now, and I often wonder why they never realised I had dyspraxia or dyslexia. It was just because I had lots of mental health issues. I nearly dropped out of the course. But then I have had jobs as well. And when I did get diagnosed, then they did put reasonable adjustments in place. And I was given a work coach to help me understand dyspraxia. And I also had Read and Write Gold to help with my dyslexia. So I had lots of, but my colleagues never really accepted that I had dyspraxia. They wouldn't ever really accept it. I couldn't really talk to them about it. And yeah, that's basically my thing about support really at work. So.
I kind of got lucky in terms of my academic teachers, because one teacher who actually really understood me really well, she was a dyspraxic woman herself, and I only found out because I happened to bring up dyspraxia to her, and that's how I found out. And I was like, oh, that's why you were such a good teacher, because she knew kind of like what I was going through. But I also had other teachers who were just generally understanding towards kind of like learning difficulties, particularly my academic advisor, who's kind of like the equivalent of like a personal tutor, and my dissertation advisor. They were both really, really amazing, particularly in my final year. I've got through my final year without the support of those two, so I'm really grateful for that. However, in terms of like the DSA and stuff, I know that if I went off the top of my head, I would just be on forever. So I'm going to read quickly what I put in my notes because it's only short and I won't go off scale then. So I sadly didn't have a very good doctor. They charged me basically £50 to sign the DSA form, only hand it back with the form being incomplete, which meant that obviously everything else with the DSA got delayed. And then the meeting to actually find out what support I need once it had got processed, delayed by my university. And by the time I finally was able to get support, was nearly over, I was already behind. And so I didn't actually have time to go and get the support because I was so behind and trying to catch up. So the only support I ended up taking on was the extra time in exams and essays. So unfortunately, that wasn't necessarily due to DSA itself. It was to do with my doctor and my uni kind of messing around meetings and stuff. So sadly, I didn't get support there. But what I would advise for people who are looking to get support is get in ahead if you need to, because if you do come up with some kind of issue, whether it's your doctor or meetings being delayed, if you get in ahead, you can plan for those errors, and that way you can make sure you get the support at the beginning of term rather than later on. So that's kind of the advice I'd give there.
Lovely, that's great advice. Thank you, Chloe. The help I got, so I was diagnosed at university. I was diagnosed in the November, December of the first year, so I was quite lucky. The help I received was I had access to a team that I could visit maybe once a week, every other week, or once a month. They didn't help me with my work. It was literally a person I went to where I said, this is what I plan to have done by the next time I see you. So it was almost like I had an obligation to get things done within a timely manner, because being able to keep track on time is something I cannot do. Whereas if I had someone to visit every week or every month, that helped. I also got a laptop because writing really, really hurts my hands, which I know a number of us dyspraxics struggle with. That's due to our hypermobility in our fingers. Our fingers basically sublock. It's like dislocating, but not properly. And you know, putting in too much pressure, not enough pressure, that kind of thing. So I had a laptop. I also had a dictaphone so that I could record lectures and then listen back to them. Because of our verbal processing, we don't always hear everything that's being said. We hear the beginning and the end of the sentence, but not necessarily the middle. So that's what I had at university. I was also meant to have extra time for exams and things, which I did have, but I was downgraded for it, which I only just found out 3 days ago. So I know, I only found out 3 days ago, and I finished uni ages ago, that they weren't meant to do that. They didn't realise that I had it as part of my disability thing. I don't know if I'll ever bother questioning it or not. I'll just leave it as it is because it was years ago now. But keep an eye on that if you're at uni. At work, not every workplace is supportive. Some workplaces might try and push you out if you try and ask for support. They're not good ones. Recognise them straight away if you can. But my current workplace, for example, they allow me extra time on certain things. They know that if they have a verbal conversation with me, they have to follow it up with an email, and I email them back so that we both know that we've understood what's been said. That's a really good example of a reasonable work adjustment, because conversations can be had, but whether or not it's been retained is a whole other story. I've said before, make a paper trail of everything, whether it's work, personal. You've got paper trail of everything, because sometimes other people will say things, forget that they've said it, and at least then you've got proof of it. You've also got proof of saying to someone that that's what you understood, and if you misunderstood it, well then you've told them what you have understood. So that's how I've been supported in my work and things like that. So the next one is clothing and appearance.
Whoa.
So, all right. So this is something we've all spoken about as a group. So it's one of the things that women have a lot of expectation on, and it's one of the things that we struggle with, especially as dyspraxic. We're expected as women to have amazing hair and makeup, and we're expected to wear clothes that are just designed for people with 10 legs, I swear to God. And obviously there's the experience of shopping and things like that. So this is more of us talking about our personal experiences of how those expectations have affected us and how we manage or lack of managing that, because that's okay as well. That's totally fine.
Oh, I hate every single part of this. It's all just horrible. I'm just no good at anything like that. I'm no good at working out like what goes together. I buy clothes when I need clothes because I've run out of clothes. Like, so I buy what I have, clothes that I need to wear, and then I wear them until they fall apart. And really, that tends to be the same sort of thing. I don't care at all, and I'm not sure if that's all dyspraxia and partly just because I don't care, but I really don't. But it's definitely a gender issue, because with things like certain jobs won't take you if you don't wear makeup or high heels. Dyspraxic waitress in high heels will never work. But it's still such a big thing. It's definitely a gender thing.
Oh, is it me? Okay. I would say there's certain things that I don't wear because it just feels incredibly uncomfortable. For me, jeans, I can't, like it just, they never fit right. They just feel really uncomfortable. Like, I don't know if it's like an oversensitivity thing to like just how it feels against my skin, but no. I've like mostly abandoned heels. I don't do it. But for me, like with clothing, it definitely depends, but I tend to of course, like be more about being not in restricted articles of clothing. It's very hard for me to do because I cannot afford not to wear a bra. Like some people can get away with it, I can't, and it's really, really frustrating. In terms of like makeup, I'm okay with doing makeup, but like it is rather exhaustive, and then I feel it still feels almost like I'm being straitjacketed because I can't touch my face. I have to, like, if I have an it or something, I have to like just lightly like, it's, of course, like the whole thing will smudge, and then if that happens, then I'll just end up taking it off. I don't really care. What have I forgotten? Hair. Yeah, afro hair is a lot. It just is. I only just learned how to twist my hair this lockdown, I had more hair than this before. Like I'd been growing it back over the last year, and before that, like I'd spent most of the last decade like doing it super low buzz cut, because I don't really care for hair like that. Like loads of people are like, oh, it's like a woman's crown and glory. So like that's a whole nother issue. But in terms of just like comfort and stuff, because I get really hot as well, and I tend to like seem to generate heat from my head. Like I just don't like anything that's going to make me excessively uncomfortable. So anything to make things easier in general, I will do that. And I literally only cut off some of my hair because I'm just like, this is taking too much time. And twisting requires those fine motor skills. I've tried to learn how to do the 3-strand continuous like braid, and it's a struggle. So I said, no, I'm going to opt out of doing that. And I'm probably never going to fully grow it back to like how long it was in my early teens. And I'm quite happy with that. So basically just do what the hell you want to make yourself be comfortable. You will get pushback. Trust me. Like everybody seems to have a freaking opinion about like.
Oh, she's gone.
Oh gosh.
Well, hopefully she pops back in.
I hope so, because that was really good.
Yeah.
I know me personally, I can't even do like bunchies straight either side, let alone be able to do full braid. Oh, here she is.
Never.
I don't know why it just dropped out. Sorry, it just dropped out randomly.
Well,
that was really good. That was really good. I was going to say, I relate to both what both you and Kayleigh said. All my life, exactly, Kayleigh. I buy clothes because I have to. I wear clothes to be comfortable. I've tried wearing makeup when I was younger, but never really felt comfortable in it. So I gave up really. I know we were talking a little bit beforehand about getting ready for this chat. And there's no way I could put makeup on. I thought about it. I'd love to feel like that and to put makeup on, but it's not me. And I really wanted to be me in this video. And part of being dyspraxic is not wearing makeup. So why would I wear makeup? Because I'm dyspraxic. I can't do it. I wear makeup for special occasions, like when my sisters got married, or occasions like that. But I have a daughter now who absolutely so opposite to me. She loves makeup, and she's the one that helps me now. I do appreciate that. But I have definitely with my hair. I've never done anything with my hair. I still don't do anything with my hair. My daughter has always said to me, "Why don't you do something with it?" But I just have it. I used to have it cut really short, so that literally I hardly, didn't have to do anything. During lockdown, yes, it did get very long, and I didn't like it, and I couldn't wait to get it cut. And I deliberately had it cut this short after lockdown, in case we go back into lockdown, because I want it cut really short now, so that it won't grow too long.
I did it as a child. I used to have really long hair as a child, and then one day I just went into town on my own at about 10, 11 and come back with really short hair. And I went, what have you done? I was like,
Chloe?
Other things I have in common with like what's already been spoken, so things like heels, and I'm with you on the jeans. Can't stand jeans. But the other thing, probably the only thing I can think of on the top of my head that's not already been mentioned is tights. I struggle so much with tights. My feet get stuck, and then I can't get it in like the right position, and it like twists round. And I also, if I do manage to get them on, they get holes within about 5 seconds. So yeah, tights are just a no-go zone for me.
That's why sorry Chloe to interrupt, but that's why I decided to start wearing trousers. So that I don't have to wear tights.
Yeah, I've come to the conclusion if the holes are on my feet, I just ignore them. Can't see them in shoes. It's fine.
See, I really love wearing tights. It's just I've just figured out a method of doing them, but like I just have the only thing that I really hated when I was younger, I would get made to wear them, especially to church, and it just feel gross and sweaty. And then they'd like, when they slip down and then the crotch is like at your knees kind of thing.
Yeah.
So like to prevent them from like slipping, that I have to always make sure that I have like shorts on top of them to keep like almost like girdle them. But like I said, with the kind of restrictive clothing, it is really just like, it just feels like a straitjacket by the end of the day, and it's purely for aesthetics, wearing tights, because like I have a million patterns. But like in general, if I just really really want to make sure I have a good day and I'm comfortable, like I have an event to go to, I'd really prefer to like just be comfortable. So most of the time I avoid those kind of things in general.
I prefer leggings over tights. I used to have the same issue. So some schools, girls have to dress a particular way. The boys can wear trousers or shorts, but the girls have to wear a certain colour tights. They have to wear a certain type of skirt. And the jumpers are horrible. I don't know about you guys or anyone with dyspraxia, but as soon as I bring home an item of clothing, the tags come off because they rub my neck or they rub my side. I'm really sensitive to things like that. But the other issue I have in terms of appearance is I struggle with holding my hands up. So if I'm doing hair, I'm instantly like resting my hand. I'm trying to find anything I can to rest my arms onto.
Me too.
I'm doing it. It takes me forever, and then I do it and I realize it's wonky, and I get really upset by that. I get really upset when things don't go, because when I envision this really amazing, cool idea. I've been on Pinterest, I've been on Instagram, I've tagged all these things that I want to kind of do. And then I try my hardest to do it, because you see all these other elegant ladies and they've done all these wonderful things. I mean, the truth is they probably have 4 other people to help them. But as far as the motion is aware, it's just one person. But I get really tired in my arms because of my hypermobility as well. My fingers start to hurt. And obviously with doing things like makeup, and as you were saying earlier, sometimes like you forget you're wearing makeup. The next thing you know, you've rubbed your eye and you've got panda face. Or you're eating food, and I know I've said recently that when I'm eating food, I get it everywhere. So sometimes I've got like gravy up here, and you can't just wipe it off, because then you've got a patch of foundation that isn't there, and it's really obvious.
Toothpaste as well, same thing.
Yeah. I find with some clothes as well. So there is that expectation of dressing in certain ways, and there are trends that change a lot. So sometimes there's trends of like maxi dresses. I remember that. So I would always be tripping on the dress. I wouldn't understand, like I would forget that you have to pick up the dress to go up steps, and instead I would not do that, trip over face first kind of thing. And there are some textures on some jumpers and things like that I just really struggle with, and I get really upset when I can't wear certain things because everyone else can. Like in my eyes, everyone else can do that. Everyone else can have this flawless makeup. Everyone else can have this amazing type of hair. But for me, I struggle to do that. And if I do, I have to spend hours doing it. And then I get really tired, and it's like, I'm meant to be going out now, but I need a nap. So it's kind of, there are those expectations there. When I was younger, I obsessed over it because other people were doing these things that I couldn't. So I was trying to prove myself. And that's when I had my rainbow hair. I had all this crazy makeup and stuff. And I would literally spend about 5 hours doing just that, just for a photo, just so that I could prove to myself. So those things are achievable, but they take a really long time. And it's so exhausting because we're having to put in more effort than what a normal person would.
Definitely. There's definitely been places where I haven't gone because I've been like, I won't be able to look right. I won't be able to dress up in the same way as everyone else. I'm not going. There's definitely things I've done which is completely stupid. Really, really silly. But someone's just on here, does anyone else compare themselves to other people?
100%.
That is such a thing, particularly with women. Particularly with women, they expect you to compare with each other. Just don't play. My best friend is amazing at makeup. She's like a makeup goddess. Fabulous. other than the fact that I get her to do my makeup every now and then when I feel like it, makes no difference in anything. Don't start comparing each other and contrasting. Just don't do it. Just don't let it happen.
I think it's because you get articles that are like, oh, top 10 women who can do this, or you even get like TV shows that are like, you get like Bride, where it's like, oh, the bride that likes goth stuff win, or the bride that likes princess stuff win, and it's like competing for like different styles and stuff, when really you should just be allowed to do what's comfortable.
Yeah.
It's always the same image of a person as well. So it's always, you know, that kind of look. It's always the same. It may be a slightly different person, but it's always the same, and it's stamped on like every different media thing as well. So, you know, especially for women and women of colour, they're seeing that this is what you should look like, and then, you know, we're all looking at ourselves and going, that's never going to be me.
No. And even for people who it is, so what? Great for them. That's great.
Great for them.
Just move on.
Yeah. Okay. So our next topic is social impact. So this is how we react or don't react socially. The order has changed. So we'll go round.
Okay.
Right. So with like social expectations, I think the main thing with dyspraxia is like when like women are expected to be like quiet, legs crossed, don't take up space sort of type image. It doesn't really work when you walk into a room, fall flat on your face, spill drink everywhere, and everyone looks at you. It's really hard. You can't do it, which is good because we don't want them images of women, but it's still really socially awkward. So socially uncomfortable wherever you go. It's particularly like if you're quite shy or quite quiet, you know that the second you walk into a room and fall over, everyone's going to look at you, and you're not just going to be smiling prettily in the corner. It's not going to work. And though that's a good thing in some ways, it can be awful in others. And like, it really doesn't follow societal's expectations at all.
Not ladylike.
No, not really.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I just wanted also to talk a bit about the social impact. Obviously, I didn't know I had dyspraxia as a teenager, but now I can look back and see how much it did impact me, because I just felt no good at school. And my self-esteem was rock bottom for most of my life, to be honest, until I got diagnosed, really. And I was thinking, as an adolescent, I was so shy. I would hardly say anything. And I had very little social skills. And yeah, I just wondered if anyone else had any adolescent experience of that.
I struggled with like social skills, mainly because I think it's hard when, for instance, even if you're like in quite a big school, even things like just going down the corridor, spatially aware and not bumping into people, knowing who's on the left and right side of you and stuff like that. Things as simple as that, when you're like a teenager, when you're already struggling just to find your, you know, place within the space you're in, that can affect things a lot, let alone anything else. So yeah, I definitely identify with that. I am just going to quickly, as a heads up, I got a thing coming up saying that I've got 10%. So if I drop out, I'll rejoin on another device. So just a heads up if that happens.
Yeah. Carry on. Your turn.
Should I go? Or?
Yeah, sure.
So social impact. I don't know if this is a dyspraxic thing. I had a therapist a while ago, sometime last year, that thinks I'm on the autistic spectrum, but they wouldn't give me any further information. They were just like, this is just something you have to make up your mind that you are. But like with my dyspraxia thing, like I know there's a lot of like, you know, kind of cross things with both of those kind of disorders and conditions. I don't know what the right word is. In any case, the thing that she's commented on and other people have commented on that I don't put a lot of stock in is my lack of initially my lack of like facial expression, that I'm monotoned, that I don't do, you know, the usual kind of socially accepted cues and that kind of thing. And I don't put a lot of stock in that, because the other thing is eye contact. I don't put a lot of stock in what people are saying in that respect, because there is a cultural difference. Things like looking in somebody's face and they're older than you, in my culture at least, is like a big no-no. As for like kind of my lack of kind of like facial expression, or even just like, you know, just general body language kind of thing, I don't think it's an obligation on me to do those things if I don't know the person. You know, like I have to become comfortable in that often it's a new environment, in order for me to relax, basically. So there's always, when I'm going into these things, there's always this perception that I'm this intimidating person. And that's also a kind of slightly racialized stereotype. And as well with like how I've decided to present myself in terms of hairstyling and attire, there's also that on top of it, that people want to put their perceptions on me. And the previous place I worked would also, they had this kind of company-wide tagline, like, perceptions are reality. So anything that they perceived about me must be absolutely correct. And that got to me a lot. And it was a very male environment. Firstly, I was the only Black woman there, and there was less than 20 women in that environment also. And so, like, I'm gathering that they didn't have a whole lot of experience with somebody from my background in the first place, and then nothing that they ever had to say about my demeanor was ever positive. So, like, in terms of like my work career, it's been very stressful, because I always have to be fielding expectations, and I think people are expecting me to prove them otherwise, and I refuse to do it. Like, if they want to think how they want to, then that's fine. But there's no place that I've gone to work where I felt like, really, this is a place that I want to stay, because these people are always going to be viewing me through a certain light. In terms of like school and stuff, much of the same, really. Like, oh, you're intimidating, or I thought you were intimidating at first, as if I'm supposed to always to present a kind of like, you're kind of all welcome to greet me however you want, kind of thing. So it's never not been annoying. It's just something I've unfortunately had to get used to, but I'm going to keep very strong in my stance that it's not my obligation to make anybody feel comfortable at first. As long as I'm being professional and not, you know, overtly aggressive, then or like, you know, rude or anything, which is not how I've been raised to be anyway. Like, my mum would be absolutely mortified if I was really rude just out of nowhere to somebody. Like, yeah, not my problem.
You just want to be really rude all the time.
You know, yeah, like it's generally not my problem. So
being assertive as well, like just generally saying, you know, this is me, this is what I'm doing, these are my expectations. On women, that's considered as being bossy, that's considered being aggressive, but it's not. Like, that is just, you know, making people aware of your boundaries, and that should be accepted. Exactly. I've had a similar workplace where it was so misogynistic, it was entirely men, and the women were expected to, like, clean up after them. So I was expected to do jobs that weren't even mine, and I'd been patted on the head, people had commented on my body. So I have an issue which causes me to be very thin, and they felt that it was acceptable to, like, grab my wrists, poke me in the ribs. Like, they took advantage of the fact that I wasn't always able to process what had happened until after it had happened, because that's, you know, like with the dyspraxia, sometimes things don't process until after they've happened. And a lot of the time we are taken advantage of. I had a similar issue at school where I didn't really get on with the girls. I didn't understand the politics within girl groups at school. I wasn't able to keep up with who's dating who and who's the enemy of the day. That is something that is kind of forced onto girls, is that that's how they have to behave with one another, is that they always have to be against one another. And so for me, I was kind of like, well, I don't understand the whole girl group, so I'm going to spend more time on the guys because they're very upfront with everything. And I was quite nervous and quite timid, and they took advantage of that. And so they were very inappropriate. You know, they were touching me in ways that they shouldn't have been, but because I was never taught that those are things that a woman shouldn't have to deal with, it was always, oh, but boys are being boys, that's just what boys do. Well, they fancy you or they're flirting with you, but I shouldn't have to be sexually assaulted and then be told, oh, it's just boys being boys. And, you know, the way they spoke about me. And again, because I didn't understand the politics of the girls' groups, the boys were my friends, and I wasn't aware that the way that they were treating me was wrong. I didn't understand the process of that. And because I was scared to talk to people, adults got frustrated with me because I had a lot of issues with my speech when I was younger, and it's something I've spent years working on, but I wasn't able to finish my sentences. I wasn't using the correct words to explain things. So when I would try and talk to adults, they got frustrated with me and they didn't want to talk to me. So I was never able to say, this is the relationship I have with my group of friends, is this normal? They just always assumed that I was, because I was quite emotional about stuff as well, because I couldn't process emotions very well, and that's where the kind of autism crossovers come in. And so it was a case of I was just ignored. They were bored of dealing with me. I always had an issue. There was always something I was struggling with. So as far as they was concerned, they didn't really care that much. And so I was dealing with a lot emotionally. I was very much on my own because I was the only girl in my group. I couldn't talk about certain issues that girls had. And, you know, I didn't get on with the other girls in my year because I just didn't understand those politics. So it can be quite dangerous sometimes when you think about, you know, how people take advantage of that. I know some of the other girls that we've spoken to, they've had similar experiences where they've been taken advantage of by the guys, which is really unacceptable. And I think that's where it comes with boundaries as well, which we're going to talk about in a second, with relationships. I just want to make everyone aware on time as well. If we can try and keep the next bit, I know I'm not one to talk, but sorry. So the next thing we're going to talk about is hypermobility, posture, and exercise. So dyspraxia people, we're very likely to be hypermobile. Not everyone is, but a lot of us are, which can affect things like our posture and exercise, which I know is everyone's favourite topic. That's sarcasm, in case anyone didn't pick that one. Kayleigh?
I think like my first memory of that sort of thing is because I wasn't diagnosed in school. In primary school, I used to have to do this wake up, shake up dance routine. I remember it being the bane of my life. And I was 11, and it was like the worst time of my life. I was like on a breakdown nearly every morning going to school. I just couldn't do it. I had no coordination. There was no way I could do it. But because nobody knew about dyspraxia and things like that, it turned into quite a big issue where they got my mum involved, and were like, I was a very quiet child and I would just outrightly refuse to do it, which was unusual for me. And it was lots of issues, but I just remember that feeling of how come everyone else around me can do this and I can't? It's that how come it's something that people can do and I can't? And I think from then I just avoided any sort of anything that needs coordination. Have you ever tried a CrossFit? Awful things. Avoid anything that requires coordination.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like you. I've always hated sport. I never obviously knew why I was not coordinated, but I knew I wasn't, and so I just avoided anything like that, basically.
I'll just read again for this one because I know I'll go on if I don't. So I have never been able to do sit-ups in childhood. I did gymnastics but couldn't do handstands and always fell off the beam. I get aches or pains in my feet and back on long walks walks and even experience as a teen. I danced like a duck, not a swan, but have always been a great swimmer. I'm dyspraxic and also in recovery from binge eating disorder, and my difficult exercise has made it hard to reach and maintain a healthy weight because of this. So that's kind of something that area of dyspraxia can affect. So yeah.
For me, I can't say I've had huge problems in terms of sport. There's obviously, like you say, the CrossFit. It just feels really awkward. It feels like my body is moving beyond my control. But like most things, I do notice at first, like I have very poor timing. Say like trampolining, like I bought a trampoline, like a mini trampoline to work out at home because I can't swim right now, obviously COVID. But yeah, at first I noticed that like my coordination felt a bit weird. So I was like, I don't like this. But I usually try to persist. Skipping, it depends. I think mostly with like, it depends if I'm like really tired or fatigued. And in speaking of swimming, I had swimming lessons, like I think many of us did, like if we're talking about the UK wise, like from primary school. And I think I had them until about like year 4. And I just didn't understand. I was like, why did my feet have to move at the same time as my hands, kind of thing? And I just didn't understand at the time. And then I think it's about 2 years ago now was when it clicked, and I had swimming lessons, and yeah, like within like maybe 3 or 4 intensive sessions, like one after the other each day. Yeah, like I can swim all right. It's a bit too splashy, but I can at least like travel a little bit across the pool, and I've improved as I've gone along. So yeah, like just like as an ending for what I'm gonna say is like with those kind of things, like I don't really think you should say like you can never do those things. Sometimes it really is about like, you know, how you say about the delayed processing. It really is just that, and sometimes it's years of delay, which is rather frustrating, but you can eventually get it with persistence sometimes. So just like don't write anything off completely.
Yeah, I see there is a lot of frustration within the community, and I understand that frustration, and it's very much a can't do it, won't do it mentality. I understand where that comes from, because when I was a kid, I was very much like that, because I used to be aware of people watching me. And, you know, kids are awful. You know, when they notice one child is unable to do something the others can, they make you aware that they are aware. And I remember as a child, I had the similar thing with swimming, where it's like, why do I have to move my feet and my legs? It's one or the other. You know, my brain at the time was just one or the other. And I will say I did swimming for years, and my parents kind of pushed me to keep on doing it. My parents never held me, well, we never knew I was dyspraxic. My stepmom was a sports teacher, so we always did stuff. If you're not good at it today, that doesn't mean you're not going to be good at it tomorrow or next week or next year. You know, you enjoy it, we enjoy it, so we'll do what we can. And this is something I've said a lot on. Just because you're not good on other people's standards doesn't mean it's not good for you. And I've always been the same with sports. But one thing that was good for me is growing up at school, I was very quiet. I was actually mute. I didn't speak to anyone until I was somewhere between the ages of 6 and 8. I was very selective in who I spoke to because I had a really bad stutter. I wasn't able to process my sentences. As I said, I had a lot of issues with speech. So I was kind of just ignored for a lot of stuff. So when I did sports, I could do things at my own pace. And so sometimes when I did things wrong, it was only me noticing. I mean, some kids would notice, but I was very much kind of did things at my own pace. So when I did eventually learn how to do things, I did it in a way that was good for me. It wasn't the way everyone else did it. It was completely different. And I found that using that later on in life of, okay, well, the way they want to teach me how to do something isn't working, so I need to learn my own way. And by doing that, I really excelled in a number of different things. Just because the way everyone else teaches isn't right for you, it doesn't mean there isn't a different version. It's just giving yourself the patience to find what that is. And it is frustrating. It is. There are tears. There are nights of, I can't do this. I am the worst. I'm never going to be able to. Patience and being kind to yourself, using positive words on yourself. It is difficult, but it can be done.
Similarly, don't just because you're dyspraxic you won't be able to do it. I'm actually a really strong swimmer, which is really strange considering I can't do anything else. But I'm a really quite. I think it's probably because my dad's attitude was sink or swim growing up, so we learned quickly. But I'm quite strong at it, so there's probably something that you can do. Some people might be great at dance, so don't not give things a go just because you're dyspraxic. Give it a shot.
And I think knowing what your limits are as well. Oh, hopefully she'll
come back
in.
Yeah.
With hypermobility, I know for me, I can do all the weird, wonderful party tricks that people can do. So I can do that weird thing. I can
do that as well.
I can, lift. I can do that behind my back. I can bend my thumb. I can do all those things. So it's important to also know your limits, because there are some things that other people can do that might actually cause you physical harm. So just get to know your body, what you can do. And again, just because you can't necessarily do it the same way as other people doesn't mean that that's wrong. As long as you still enjoy it, that's all that matters. Cool. I believe we lost Chloe. Did she speak? There she is. Oh, she's just got back in. Chloe. Oh yeah, of course. Her battery died.
Yes, that was the problem.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get my thing to balance.
We will be asking questions from you guys. So if you do have questions, we will ask them at the end. So don't worry if you've got those burning questions, we will try and get round to them. Chloe, did you say your piece?
I think I did. I said about stuff before.
Sorry.
I think I can't remember.
You read it out, Chloe.
Short-term memory does not exist. Okay, so the next one, I need to refer back to my notes because I can't remember what
Bathroom.
for this.
Bathroom was the next one.
So bathroom, the overthinking of stress of using public toilets, things like period products, and things like that.
Wait, so that's really a thing? Because there's some things that I'm still totally unaware of. So me feeling really stressed out about bathrooms, it's a thing.
Yeah,
it's a thing. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not a complete freak then.
I think there are a lot of things that we experience that cross over with other issues, and you'll see. So the Dyspraxia Foundation will share them as well. So you've got things like ADHD, OCD, autism, and things like that. So a lot of dyspraxic traits are similar to others. And I think that's where a lot of our issues come in. But also, I'm being diagnosed for autism at the minute, so I have to try and kind of sieve between what is one or the other. But what we mentioned for bathroom are those things. So if we start with Kayleigh again, if you're happy to.
Sure. I think the first thing I'm expecting anyone to do here is go, periods, no. Anyone wants to do. Which, by the way, is really stupid. If you fall over and cut your leg, you don't freak out about blood. Why are people...
Well, some people might.
Well, yeah, you don't.
But it's not universal, yeah.
Yeah, you fall over and cut your leg. You don't. We need to get over that. But period products and things. Lots of people struggle with period products. I've never really struggled personally, though. I definitely would prefer to use Diva cups because they're so much less plastic, and there is no way a dyspraxic is ever going to be able to use it. Well, personally, I will not be able to use a Diva cup at all.
I've tried bloodbath.
Oh,
looks like you've, I don't know, sacrificed a goat. I think it takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. I think
it takes a lot of practice. Definitely do not use a public bathroom whilst you're trying to work out how to use one of those things.
Yeah.
If you can use them, I am very jealous. I have one. I've tried.
I actually find them really easy to use.
Do you?
I use the organic cup one though. I don't know how different they are from one of the other.
Different shapes. There's
you might teach me.
It's more of a kind of shaped like that. Yeah, like it took me a little while, and yes, I completely understand about the messiness.
Yeah.
I don't dare to change it in, like, when I was at work, like, I'd make sure I'd have extra, like, a security blanket of, like, an extra pad or something, because, like, it just felt really disgusting to have to do that in a toilet that wasn't my toilet or bathroom. But yeah, like, it was super easy to use once I got used to it, and I prefer it to, like, pads and tampons. Like, it doesn't, like, tampons feel like a foreign object, and pads, like, it's basically a nappy. Like, it's the plasticky kind of feeling, unless you go for the cotton variety, which I've very rarely had the opportunity to use. Yeah, the cup all the way,
We'll
all the
definitely
way.
have to get you to do
I
it.
really wish that, I mean, I'm past all that now, I've gone through the menopause, but I couldn't use tampons. I tried it, but I just felt uncomfortable using them. So the only option for me was using pads. And I definitely would have gone to what you're all using now. I would have stopped using pads, definitely.
I'd like to try and use the cup again, but I have one of the original cups, where they're not as easy to use, and the texture of them are very different. And I think texture for me is very important. And I think that's why a lot of people struggle with pads as well, because it's like I guess it depends on kind of what sizes you go for and what kind of underwear and clothes you're wearing, but I'm almost always aware that I'm wearing them. And it's annoying throughout the day, because then you're thinking about it, and it's something you want to forget. Whereas with tampons, I can forget that I'm wearing them. But I have endometriosis, so I don't always have the luxury of just wearing tampons. Sometimes I have to wear, the pads, and I've even considered sometimes wearing the tenor lady underwear. Because sometimes you don't have that luxury, but I would like to try the cup again, but I think I'd have to get one of the newer ones.
I recommend Organic Cup. It's like the silicone they use. It feels quite soft,
Okay.
and it's quite malleable. Like, I've never used any of the earlier iterations of any of the other brands or anything. So, as far as I'm concerned, Organic Cup is a go-to for me. Yeah. I
will
recommend it.
definitely look into that. I think with pads as well, I think there's a lot of kind of confusion about how to wear them, like what goes at the front, what goes at the back, because I've recently looked for all my product labels and there's no information on how to, like, apply them to your underwear. And I've gone through all, and I've got 3 different packs at the minute, because I always forget and end up just having to buy them if I go places. I always forget to bring anything with me. And I've literally gone through, there is no instructions on them. Only the tampons come with instructions. The pads don't. You don't know what goes at the front, what goes at the back.
I think some of them do. I think at least one, always one that I had a while ago, like they have like a heart or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the only one I've seen that has that. I recommend them, the ones with the heart.
Yeah.
Then you know that's the front.
Yeah.
Chloe?
You guys kind of covered a lot of what I would have said. I'd say the one thing I would recommend, if you find getting pads in the right place difficult and you find tampons difficult, tampons with applicators, but the ones that don't have applicators are like hell. But you can get reusable, they're basically like knickers, but they've got special padding built into them, and then you kind of like actually wash them and you can reuse them, and they're really good. Obviously, if you have a very, very heavy, stuff going on, you might want something extra just in case, or to bring something with you when you're out and about just in case. But if you're kind of like medium to heavy and not heavy, they're all right. And like I say, you can reuse them, which means once you've got it, maybe 3 or 4 pairs, you don't have to buy pads or tampons and stuff, because you can just reuse those and you just slip it on and off easy.
They're becoming really popular reusable in general. A lot of shops near me sell the normal reusable pads. My only worry with those is they're quite thick, and again, I like to try and forget. But I don't know, I don't have any experience with them either, I'm afraid.
The knickers aren't too thick. It's similar to
thin,
like they're almost like wearing a bikini bottom with maybe one small extra layer in it. But they're not, you don't feel like you've got a big nappy or anything. So yeah.
What were you saying, Kayleigh?
For some reason, when like women are in the bathroom and they're like changing sanitary products, they really panic and freak out that other people might possibly be able to hear them changing like a pad or a tampon. Like, what if someone hears the rustling of? Which is
you have to take a friend to put the hand dryer on.
So stupid, and I'm hoping people grow out of it, like get over it when they get into like adulthood and leave like adolescence. I'm hoping, but it's just so silly. And I know as a dyspraxic, I remember that being like a big thing as a teenager because you can't do anything quietly as a dyspraxic at all. Nothing works.
No. I struggled with that because I didn't have many girlfriends, so I would have to feed the bathroom alone, the big scary bathroom where other women might also hear that you're having a period that a large majority, not all, will also experience. It's strange, isn't it? We're scared of the thing that most of us all do. Like even as an adult, I will admit that I still sometimes go. It's strange. It's such a strange concept. Our next topic, I was really hoping Sarah had a lot to say on this one, which is dyspraxia parenting. I won't talk for her because I don't think that's fair, but hopefully we can, maybe if I do a video separately with Sarah and Siobhan about parenting, because a lot of people think that neurotypical have dyspraxic kids, but some dyspraxics also have children. That's a thing that we're allowed to do. Would anybody like to discuss? I think Siobhan.
I'm quite happy to leave that for the next session, maybe for another session.
Yeah, we can do.
I think the only thing if we've got time, is just that like dyspraxic dads aren't given the same thing as dyspraxic mums. Like it's seen as normal if dad can't cook tea or dad can't clean or dad's never been any good at hoovering. It's kind of a normal thing, where as a mum, a dyspraxic mum is kind of different and higher expectations, I think.
Yeah, there is. I remember one partner, more than one partner I've had in the past, where I've always been nervous about the idea of having children because I've always worried how my dyspraxia will affect my being a parent, especially with things like timekeeping, being able to, manage my motor skills in terms of because babies are small and fragile, they're terrifying, and I always said I wasn't sure how I felt about that, and I was shamed for it, and I was a little bit bullied about well, you're a woman, you that's what you do, and I'm a dad, I'm never going to change a nappy, I'm never going to be the one making food, and that's really unfair because there are so many dads out there who are main parent and happily so. And there's always the odd one who just, builds on that stereotype. And it's really upsetting as a woman to hear that, you're being expected to do all these things that you might need help with. And I think, in a relationship, that should be something you do together. Yeah, I've always been worried about having kids for that reason.
I second you on that for many reasons. For me, the thing is like the lack of initiative on mostly the male part of the male side of the human race. Like I just can't, and like having to balance all of these kind of tasks around the house that I need to do is really overwhelming, even when I have found an adaptive way of like writing down all the things that I need to do, like to constantly like needing to say this needs to be done, that needs to be done, like it just makes me so angry. And then like to think that like if I am going to become a parent, which is very unlikely because I cannot tolerate nonsense at all, like to know that I'm going to be the only one who has to deal with all of the kid stuff, or the majority of the kid stuff, plus housework, and if I have a career as well, like, I don't know how that's going to go down. So it might seem like I generally don't know if parenthood is ever going to be for me, and people might say like, oh, you're kind of living that way because of how other people have made you think and feel and whatever, and I think that's fine, because the examples that I've seen will not benefit me in the slightest. They will degrade my mental health and just make me feel really resentful. And the last thing I would want to do is be resentful towards a child for a situation they can't control and they've just been born into. So I'd rather not take that risk and damage another person. Do you get what I mean? Like, it might seem like I'm depriving myself of that part of my life, but I'd rather not venture there if it's going to result in a hurt little person that's going to turn into a hurt big person, you know?
It's a similar mentality I had. My growing up experience was quite traumatic in some areas, and I always worried that because that's the only example of like very young parenting, is that what I'm then gonna do because I don't know what's right? Because I know what's right and wrong, but what if I do something and not realize that it's not the done thing to do? And you know, like on TV and in movies, there is that whole kind of stereotype of mum does X, Y, and Z and dad does X, Y, and Z. And the relationships I had when I was younger, that was the expectation that they had also picked up on. I'm very lucky now that my partner, we discuss this a lot, because I say to him, you know, these are the things I struggle with. And so if we're going to have a family, it has to be kind of split on what each of us are good at. And that doesn't necessarily mean that things will be split 50-50. Some things might be more one way and more the other, but it's a conversation that you have to have with a partner. And unfortunately, there are people in relationships where they're going to kind of almost accept the stereotype that's been bestowed upon them. And that's not necessarily always our fault, because that's what's fed to us. When you're a child, the girls get the kitchen set, the girls get the Hoover, the girls get all the pretty makeup things, and the boys get to do, you know, the Action Man, the dinosaurs.
Which is way more fun.
Which is way more fun. I remember stealing my brother's toys all the time. So those are expectations that are drilled on you from a very, very young age. Fortunately, there are many people who, you know, have kind of gone, well, actually, no, this is a very different world. And there are some, I know some people who co-parent really, really well, and it's really admirable. But unfortunately, there still are, and that worries me.
I did see a quote of someone was talking in a forum about dyspraxia, and they were talking about how hard it must be for dyspraxic mothers, and it was just a random group of men, and they were talking about how hard it must be for dyspraxic mothers and how they must really struggle. And just like, do they ever have this conversation about dyspraxic fathers? Do they ever sit and be like, oh, I wonder how they'll be a dad, I wonder how they'll cook their tea, I wonder how they'll wash their clothes? Like, never.
It's nice and validating to hear that, you know, some groups of guys have considered that, because that's nice that, you know, people have kind of recognised the struggles that we may have. Chloe, did you want to add to any of that?
I don't really have much I can add, because I'm not a parent myself. I'd like to be a parent one day, because I'm a very, you know, maternal person, and I do want to kind of like, you know, give love and like care to somebody one day, but I'm definitely not in a place anytime soon to be doing that. So yeah.
No worries. I mean, that what we've just discussed kind of moves on to the next bit, which is home life and quote wifey expectations, which again is that stereotype. Thankfully, a lot of households have squashed that stereotype, but it's still something that is expected of us. Yeah, go for it.
I just want to briefly say about that when I was working and I had Anastasia, my daughter, so I was the one that was working, and then my partner was the one that stayed at home. Now, I didn't know at that time I had dyspraxia, so it wasn't because I had dyspraxia I, you know, wasn't able to do, but he was literally much better at me than cooking, cleaning, doing all those things, and I was much better at going out to work. So it really worked out And my sisters used to say to me, how come you're the one going out to work and, not staying at home with your child? And yeah, I did have to have a lot of discussions about that. But, it really did work at the time. So yeah, definitely I can vouch that it can work in that way.
It's good to hear that that is something that worked for you. I know a few people who have done that. My favourite TV show is New Girl, and two of the characters, that is how they do things. It's so nice to see that in the media because you very rarely see it, and that's when you get people who ask questions like, why is it like that? Like, it just is.
Yeah. And also these new expectations as well. For some reason, they seem to have rebranded into being the domestic goddess. So it's she's strong, she's powerful, but she's still cleaning.
So that's so nauseating. Oh my god.
It is, isn't it? It's she's strong, she's powerful, she can do anything as long as she's cleaning as well, on the side. And that sort of image is still a big thing going out there. And if you're dyspraxic, trying to just make beds is a nightmare.
I never make my bed, and people can judge me all they want. It's never happened.
I'm really bad for making my bed, to be honest. Really bad.
I think though, I don't know if this is a dyspraxia thing, but I'm very much set on routine and having certain things done at a certain point. So the best way that I can go about doing things around the house, because I'm mostly at home, my mum is the one who's working while I'm looking for a new job as a result of this whole, world situation. The best thing I do is just break down the weekly tasks into one or two things every day. There are certain things that need to be done every day, but other things that need to be seen to at least once a week. And even then, it can be really exhausting some of the time because I'm also balancing things that I'm, like I said, job hunting and, things that I also want to do as well. So yeah, I cannot imagine myself running a whole house with a whole family of my own, and because it's just going to be 10 times crazier. So yeah, I don't know how I would ever manage.
Sometimes I struggle to keep on top of things. I get overwhelmed quite quickly, especially some days my dyspraxia is worse than others. And I get stressed if my workspace and my home space isn't how I'd like it to be. And as soon as something goes wrong, it's like everything else goes wrong, and my stress gets worse and my dyspraxia gets worse. And I think if I had a family as well, I would worry that would impact on the whole family side of things. If I'm getting stressed on things, especially if I don't have someone supporting me. I think it's just very, very important.
Yeah, I agree.
I find that lists can help a bit with that kind of thing because for me, a lot of the stuff that I struggle with, I can do the thing, but I can't remember to do the thing. So if I have a list of you've got to, wash this, and then you've got to, hang this up, and you've got to cook this, or, that kind of thing. If I've got a list that I know this is what I'm doing, it's easier for me to kind of actually get into the zone and do it. And like you were saying, routine as well, it gets you into the routine because it's almost like a timetable for your day. This is what I actually have to do, and you can kind of prioritize everything else in your life around that. But as soon as something on the list gets missed off, or something happens that changes your routine, so you maybe can't complete the list, suddenly the next day you're like, oh no, what do I do? And then it kind of falls through a little bit. So yeah,
lists I recommend. Okay, the last thing on our list of things to talk about, great with words there, is relationships, boundaries and consent. This is something that's been spoken about a lot within the dyspraxia community recently, just because there's been a few boundary issues, and we just wanted to highlight on how important things like consent are, especially with those with dyspraxia. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes we don't always process things at the time that they are happening, and sometimes people can take advantage of that. And also because we're not always understanding social situations like other people are, certain things can happen which can be sometimes worrying. So would anyone like to kind of pick up on that?
Can I just start with like the reason? One of the first things we thought of while doing this, we've already had a lot of negative comments about doing a panel with just women.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people already moaning about that, which already like says a lot, doesn't it? Because there's so many panels and things that would all just be just men naturally, but as soon as it's all just women, it's going no.
The most distressing comments we're having is that's sexist. At one point, we got called racist because we were looking for a woman of color.
And that's when I'm so glad you brought that up.
I was like, how is that racist?
I want to tell these people, and I hope they're watching and listening. I want to tell these people that, quite frankly, you can F off. I don't know if I can swear on here or whatever, but go to hell, because like you have no idea what it's like when you're dyspraxic and the representation is largely male. And then like I barely know. I think only because I put this out within like my kind of online circle, like one other Black woman came forward and was like, oh, that's something that she struggles with already. But like because of so many things, it's so hard to be validated and even get help and even have that being recognized as something that we struggle with. So like it just speaks to your privilege that you can be there and have the support to no end. Everybody accepts you as you are to a large degree, but a whole entire person like me, it's sexist and racist for me to be recognized and involved and included in the conversation. Like me and whoever else is out there that's of a similar kind of background to me, we're not going to go away. So you can get used to it. And that's all, to be honest.
I think a lot of issues as well is suddenly those people aren't the centre of conversation. They're not being spoken about. And this is, and I've seen it in the comments as well, but men experience that too.
Yeah.
This is also a guy, it's like, we're not talking, for now,
not about you.
For this minute, we're not talking about you, okay? And that doesn't mean your issues aren't valid, because they are. It doesn't mean you're losing out in the conversation. It means this conversation right now is about women. And by constantly picking up saying, oh, but men this, you're trying to take away the conversation that is being focused, and you're trying to bring it back to you. You may not realise that you're doing it, and it may not be malicious. I don't believe that it's malicious, but in these situations, take a step back, please, because you're taking away the voice from people who are the minority, especially when you have got a woman of colour who's like, this whole group, it took us a long time to find a woman of colour who was comfortable to come forward, because a lot of people are scared to come forward because of the crap that comes with it. So, and we also had someone say, but women and women of colour don't experience dyspraxia any differently. And I think that speaks volumes, because just because you don't see it and it's not written in text doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I get told to provide proof every single day. This is your proof, okay? Take a step back and just listen sometimes.
If I can add why so many people tend to be unwilling to come forward and even talk about these things. Many of I'm going to speak from a Black Caribbean cultural perspective. A lot of things that we encounter in terms of anything that deviates from the so-called norm is often seen as like, because like religiosity in church and Christianity is a big thing still in those respective cultures. It's seen as ungodly and demonic and whatever else. And it makes us think that there's something very, very wrong with this. Like, I'm absolutely traumatized by a lot of like the messaging that I've had from these things. Like, one of the first, when I told somebody about like my diagnosis, they were like, why would you do that? Like, why do you need to know this stuff? It's not important. Like, this isn't like a godly thing. And I'm just like, this is exactly why people don't talk about stuff like that, because
oh, she dropped out again. Ah! Okay, she'll be back. I'm praying that she'll be back.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
I was going to say something, I forgot what it was. Yeah, just because certain groups of people aren't the centre of conversation doesn't mean that you're being ignored.
Oh, and
Like,
just, you know, we've all got bets on of how many sexist
oh yeah,
Yeah, carry on.
Carry on.
I just stopped up. Yeah, like having that kind of messaging is it does stuff to your self-esteem. And this is, and as I mentioned before about like a therapist saying that like I was on the autistic spectrum, like I have no problem if that's actually true, but she discounted a lot of the cultural relevance to that because they're unfamiliar. People do not educate themselves on these deviations and differences in like each culture. The person was just like, oh, your culture has nothing to do with it. I can clearly see that you're autistic, and refused to like point me in the right direction of like getting help if that was even the case. And you know, like I just don't even have the words when I think about it. It makes me angry all over again. So like when these guys are talking about, oh, you don't experience it any differently. Yes, we do. And it's just because it's not extensively documented, if at all, is the reason why you have no proof of these things. A lot of the things that are quantified as proof is based on a person-to-person basis, which we should all know from just our conversation here or across any other message boards, that like our experiences differ, our experiences differ in terms of how the condition affects us. So like they just kind of need to, you know, just be quiet and sit down somewhere, honestly.
I think education is really important. People are scared of what they don't know. They question what they don't know. And it's really invalidating when people say, well, where's your proof? Unfortunately, so as I said earlier, I've read 7 research papers leading up to this. And a lot of them themselves haven't done studies. They're just guessing based on conversations that they've had with other people, or the studies that they have had. The ones that do show statistics on the people they've looked at, only one of them included women. They were all young boys or men, and none of them included a person of colour. So when you say, where's your proof? There's your proof. That is your proof, and just because it isn't written on a piece of paper does not mean it exists. It doesn't exist. It does not mean that it's not an issue. You know, listen to the people around you. You know, if we're saying this is an issue, and it's like when the guys say, like you know, men do have certain expectations. Men have the expectation to be macho manly. They're expected to be strong. They're expected to be really good at conversation. You know, they have this huge expectation. And not once have we gone, yeah, but what about women?
Yeah.
This is the first time we're talking about our issues, and we're not discrediting how someone else would feel. And it's very invalidating when someone does that to us.
Definitely.
And that's where boundaries and consent comes into place as well. So it's knowing when is the right time to interject and talk about stuff. And I think being dyspraxic, we don't help ourselves.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to take things with a pinch of salt. We do before we think. That is an issue that we have. That's where the ADHD kind of comes into play. So you know, sometimes we can kind of go, okay, well, maybe they've said before they've thought, and I think it's important to own up to that. So if you have made a comment that has been, you know, taken negatively or perceived as, you know, not great, I think that's an important time to say, do you know what, I actually just wasn't thinking when I said that, but now that it's been explained, I understand. Because there is no shame whatsoever in being wrong about something. There is no shame at all in kind of going, do you know what, I just didn't know. Because, you know, as we've said, that there there hasn't been any studies on women. There haven't been any studies on people of colour with these disabilities. And so if you don't know, that's okay, but it's how you choose to react that is important. And a lot of the time we're expected to be the ones that are educating. And I understand that there aren't the resources, but that's what we're trying to do now. And I just wanted to touch on consent. So I had issues when I was younger of people just doing whatever they wanted, interacting with people without permission. And within the dyspraxia community, I don't know if everyone's involved in this, but there's a lot of people messaging privately without consent, and people trying to add people with friends without consent if they've never spoken to them, and also a lot of people getting upset and angry if people aren't responding. And as women, that's quite threatening, because we experience those kind of things not just online but in person as well. You wouldn't just start randomly calling and texting someone if they hadn't given you consent to do that. Same applies to social media, so please be wary of that.
And also there seems to be like an undercurrent of like dyspraxia, people using dyspraxia as an excuse for bad behaviour quite a lot of the time as well. It just needs calling out, I think, because there is a lot of people in the community who'll like try and flirt or ask someone out or do something, and then if they're rejected, they then blame dyspraxia, like no one ever likes me, no one ever would want to be with me, and try to use that way around. And don't use dyspraxia to be an incel. Don't do it. It's I was trying to avoid that, but don't use dyspraxia to be unapproachable. Don't use dyspraxia to try and avoid consent, because it's not going to work.
What I would say to anyone, not just dyspraxic men, not just dyspraxic women, but to anyone, is nobody owes you their time and nobody owes you their friendship. If somebody is a big figure online, or they're telling their story online and they have public profile, cool, retweet, reply to tweets even if you feel like you've got something to contribute to the conversation. But if someone's public and they have private profiles, unless you've had an interaction and there's been some kind of indication that it's okay to do so, don't randomly message private accounts. Don't random friend request private accounts, because it links into what Krystal was saying. It can come across as threatening, especially if you don't know the person very well and you don't know what their intentions are or anything like that, or even who they are. You know about them. It's really important when it comes to injuries and stuff. Don't expect just because somebody is public that they should give you their time in their private life. So I just wanted to add that.
Not necessarily just public figures. That's people as well. I'm seeing a lot in groups where people so there's one issue I've had with one particular person who has been told many times, you don't privately message people without their consent, and they keep using their dyspraxia as an excuse to continue doing that, and then being upset when other people aren't replying, and then they're saying, oh, but we're both dyspraxic, so we have to be friends. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. You have no privilege over someone else's time. You don't deserve someone to reply to you. You don't deserve it. It's not a right that you own. They own the right if they want to reply to you. They own the right if they want to interact with you. Unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of that at the moment, and I think just in general, even outside of the community, consent is really important. Consent is, yes, I would like to. Consent is, let's take this conversation private. Like if you're on a thread, let's be involved. It's willingness from the other person. And the way I normally go about it is, unless the other person says to me, let's take this conversation privately, I won't. And sometimes you're then stuck in a rut of, who's going to say it? But I think eventually you get the idea. If you're commenting on a little things and you're having these conversations, but consent in things like relationships romantically as well, it's exactly the same. Unless someone is forwardly saying, let's do it. And you know what? People change their mind. and that is okay. Someone may say, let's take this private, and then they may find that you're a bit too forward, or they've decided, actually, I'm not too keen, in which case they may say, this isn't for me. Or even if they just stop replying, again, that person doesn't owe you a reason for not want to talk to you. You could have upset them. They don't have to explain themselves.
I did get at one point from someone that just said sex ? And then I ignored it, and then I got a thing that said, I'm dyspraxic as well. Like that's gonna be, oh, okay then. I didn't realise you were dyspraxic as well. Never mind. Oh, now you've said that.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, don't do it. It's not gonna work. It's stupid.
Yeah, consent is really, really important, and remembering that people can take away their consent. And someone might say yes to something. Again, so this kind of goes back to relationships. They may say yes, but actually if their body language isn't saying yes, that means no. And I think it's really important to pay attention to that, because they may be scared to say no, and that's an issue a lot of women deal with, because when we say no, quite often that ends up being aggressive, and women end up in hospital. It happens. It's something that happened to me. I was beaten once nearly because I said no to someone. It's the same as when we're in the street, people catcall. If you tell them to bugger off, that's really scary. It's really dangerous. I can't express how important consent is. So important. Get to know what consent is as well. There's loads of videos. So Hannah Witten talks about sex and relationships and consent. I highly recommend her. Would anyone else like to add to that?
I'd definitely say, obviously, like, I agree with everything that you said. But I think, not just like, I don't know anything about what's going on in the dyspraxic community online or anything, but I'll just say, just from things that I've had experienced previously, I remember who said about like the incel comment earlier. So I have a big problem with, these kind of pickup artist kind of people that a lot of guys are taking after. Like, I cannot stand it. I don't like any of like their ethos or anything. I actively speak against it because it's so sexist. It's absolute trash. And a lot of people are taking their cues from these bottom feeder type characters, and they want to like be doing things like what they call negging, like negative commentary, and it makes people doubt themselves. And another thing that I really find off-putting is ghosting. Like, if I start talking about that, I'm gonna get so angry. But like, I totally get, like, you can revoke your, and revoke your consent and not be able to talk to people if you want to. That's, I think especially if they're pushy and they just don't know how to take messaging at all, that's fine. But I think when people just like, ghost and pretend that you're not there, that's extremely manipulative. And like, you're basically, the people that do that kind of thing are basically trash for doing that. So like, at least explain. Sometimes I don't really think from women's side, if a guy is being, not taking the cue, that you're very, very uncomfortable with how they're going about stuff. Like you said about like the sex comment, like, what is that all about? Like,
why? Why message me? Go out of your way in your
like in that case, I definitely think just giving them the silent treatment is perfectly okay. But when especially when it's from the guy's side, when you've been unapologetically assertive to stuff, and people just like, basically shut down and revoke their speech from you for no good reason, and you've done nothing wrong, and then that makes you feel like you're the one at fault. Like, very uncool behavior. Don't do it. Like, don't be learning from these pickup artist type people. Just
enthusiastic consent and not reluctant agreement.
Yeah, like I literally saw a post like that, maybe like a couple of days ago, and it was like, non-verbal or or comments that say like they're not sure about something, if it isn't an absolute yes, it's a no. And
Yeah.
people are still not getting that at all. So it just needs to be reiterated.
Body language is important.
I'm dyspraxic, so it doesn't count either.
Yeah, that doesn't count. I mean, I will say that I will, hold my hand up and say like I probably acted in some ways that I just didn't understand at the time, and I've looked back on it and I've cringed and be like, okay, I'm never gonna do that again. And like, if I see the person, even if they don't forgive me or whatever, like I'll apologize profusely. Like that's all I can do, and just I've done better as a result. I can understand, like, that's just a human experience, but to continuously use your condition as an excuse for piss poor behavior is not okay.
Yeah, there is a time and place for everything. Like as you were saying with the whole ghosting thing. If you've been talking to someone for a really, really long time, and then suddenly you disappear, that is manipulative. But if someone started messaging you and they're demanding like, why aren't you talking to me? It's like they don't owe you anything. They don't owe you an explanation why they don't want to talk to you.
Exactly.
Right, I realise that we're coming on to 2 hours of this. So quickly, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, we'll answer them as quickly as we can, because I know that there are some other women Zoom chats that are happening at 8, so I don't want to hold people up for that. So if anyone's got any questions, if you could pop them into the comments. Let's see what we've got. They're a little bit delayed, so I'm hoping they come through. If you see any that pop out, shout. Okay, I don't think we have any questions coming through at the minute, and I'm a bit cautious of time. If you look in the description to this video live stream, there is everyone's Twitter accounts, and you can find their other social medias through there. I just want to say thank you so much for coming to talk on this video. I had been very anxious to do something like this on my channel for a long time, as I discussed with Chloe, which is where we came up with the idea of doing a live stream. Because whenever I have spoken about women's issues before, I get a lot of abuse. And unfortunately, there's no kind of self-regulation where other people are kind of going, actually, you shouldn't be saying that. So if you notice someone is saying things that you know they shouldn't be, please do call them out on it. That's really important. Just because you're not being sexist, just because you're not being racist or anything like that, doesn't mean you can't join in shouting about how wrong that is. I can't understand.
It often comes across stronger as well if it comes across from like people in that group. So say like
Absolutely.
a man is saying something sexist to a woman, it actually comes across quite strong if another man was like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And when you, it's like if someone in your family says something that is really uncouth and you say to them, that is not okay, they're going to listen to that more than if some person on the internet says it. So if someone from within your group, so if you're a guy and you see a guy saying things that are really not okay, it's really important that you talk up and say that, because it really helps people within our community. And we really, really appreciate that. So thank you to people who do that, and maybe think about it if you see something like that in the future. So it's something I've been terrified to do because of those reactions. Unfortunately, those voices shout louder. So thank you so much for doing this with me, so that I'm not
Thank
scared
you for
of my
having
own
us.
voice.
Yes,
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, there are now some other Zoom events, so we will scoot over to those. Thank you to everyone who came to watch the video. These comments will stay on this video, so we will try and reply to those as the week goes. So don't worry too much if your questions didn't get answered. And we will now disappear forever.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.